Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelly Sutton-Bosley. I'm the lead research analyst for information warfare here at Norwich University, and I am proud to moderate this afternoon's presentations of the Richard S. Schultz Fellowship Research. The Richard S. Schultz Class of 1960 Symposium Fellowship was established in 2017 as an endowed fund in honor of Dick by his wife of 50 years, Myrna Schultz, and their children, Marnie and Alan, his classmates and his friends. After a wide solicitation, the students sitting here were awarded an annual fellowship grant that allowed them to pursue research. The students awarded the fellowship come from any academic discipline, and they're provided with the opportunity to pursue areas of inquiry and experiences that will promote and expand their understanding of the past and how it impacts the present and the future. Our first Richard S. Schultz Fellow to present this afternoon will be Richard Conlon. Richard is a junior from San Francisco, California, pursuing a Bachelor's of Science in Physics and a Bachelor of Arts in Studies in War and Peace with a minor in philosophy. On campus, Richard is actively involved in the Corps of Cadets, Regimental Drill Team, and Norwich University's Emergency Management Services. He is currently pursuing a commission through the Navy's Nuclear Propulsion Officer Candidate Program with aspirations to later work in academia. Richard's research examines the complex relationship between occupying forces and civilian populations during the English Civil War and the Dutch Revolt. He hopes to establish a continuity between early modern civil-military relations and current civil affairs operations. Richard.
Good afternoon, everyone. My project essentially is covering the English Civil War from 1642 to 1646 in the context of what we know currently about the formalization of civil affairs as a branch in the United States, as well as in other countries. My methodology for this was primarily conducted through an initial review of literature regarding the English Civil War, particularly regarding military conduct during the war. And then I further went into using the grant provided by the Richard Schultz Fellowship. I conducted archival research at the East Sussex Record Office, the Warwickshire County Record Office, and the National Archives UK. Most of the archival material that I used covered correspondence between garrison commanders and higher levels of command, as well as a lot of the account books of the garrisons, so the individual finances of each garrison. So for a brief overview of the 17th century and kind of the condition in it. For context, at the time of the English Civil War, on the continent of Europe, there had been the 30 Years' War raging since 1618. And that war, in general, was quite violent and a generally unrestrained conflict. A key example can be seen in the Siege of Magdeburg, which resulted in roughly 20,000 dead civilians. This conflict spread through publications and individual storytelling from Englishmen who had participated to the English population and represented an incredibly scary form of warfare, an incredibly violent one against military and civilians alike. And the English public was profoundly shaped by these. One particularly prominent book is The Lamentations of Germany, which includes many different images that are very horrific and describe the killing of merchants, the killing of civilians, the killing of priests, in very brutal ways, drawn and quartered type descriptions. And the accuracy of these reports is not particularly relevant to what I'm looking at, because I'm looking at how civilians actually interacted with military forces. So that's some of the context for civilians and military forces alike going into the English Civil War in 1642. For a description, civil affairs is a formalization of the United States Army's view on military governance, which came out of the World Wars, where the U.S. Army and the sort of allied forces are essentially thrust into a government structure where they're responsible for managing civilians, they're responsible for managing captured soldiers, and this becomes an increasing problem. We see it again in Vietnam, and we see it again in Afghanistan and Iraq, where insurgent conflicts present particularly difficult situations for occupying forces, wherein the needs of the civilians are directly tied to the war effort. And this is something that is relatively new in sort of an expeditionary context. But looking at the English Civil War and connecting those concepts and those principles that we see in modern civil affairs in the special operations forces of the United States military and other countries, we see certain principles for how garrison commanders in the English Civil War managed their relations with civilians, and connecting that to how civil affairs commanders interact with civilian populations, advise commanders, and help sort of temper relations and meet the needs of the civilian population. The English Civil War, there's primarily two forms of interactions, and they both involve money. And that's kind of the general theme, is civil affairs and civil military operations is directly tied, particularly in the English Civil War and in early modern Europe, to logistics and the finances of war. The two primary ways we see this in the English Civil War is through the contribution system and through quartering. The contribution system is the process where the local garrison commander is responsible for collecting monetary, essentially taxes, but it's on top of normal taxes, from the civilian population to support their activities in a garrison. The other method is in a garrison culture, right? Soldiers have to live somewhere, and that process is called quartering. And the way it's supposed to be done is the garrison commander is responsible for paying civilians a certain fee, rent essentially, wherein soldiers then are living in the civilian homes and in their properties. Occasionally this doesn't happen, and civilians complain about not being paid, which, in occasionally incredibly excessive sums of not being paid. And I see this in two case studies. So the two case studies I looked at for this are primarily the garrison at Borstal, which was run by Sir William Campion, who is a royalist, but also, interestingly, a Protestant. But he is responsible for maintaining that garrison for essentially the majority of the conflict. It's under siege twice during that time, and he has to move around. But in his correspondence directly with the headquarters at Oxford, you see essentially a series of orders that are instructing him to extract contributions or instructing him to destroy certain civilian property, or withdraw carts, or carts is the primary one that we see, or horses, from the civilian population, and then to send them back to Oxford for use in the war effort. This is particularly interesting because the correspondence that's instructing him to do these actions against civilians is coming all the way from, with the signature, the king, or from Prince Rupert, who is one of the primary leaders of the royalist effort. So these are quite high-level orders. And interestingly, in these correspondence, there's also descriptions to not extract contributions from certain populations because they've already been extracted by someone else, or they've already been so troubled by the war that they shouldn't have to pay a certain contribution for a certain time. And it's incredibly evident in these correspondence that they're trying to temper the stresses on the civilian population, which is something that we don't necessarily see to the same degree in an expeditionary conflict such as the 30 Years' War. The other primary case study that I looked at is Warwickshire, which was commanded essentially by Basil Fielding, the second Earl of Denbigh, and he is a parliamentarian, and we see with him a lot of petitions from both civilians and soldiers. And these petitions are complaining of a lot of different things. Sometimes the soldiers are complaining that the civilians aren't catering to them enough, but most of the petitions are from civilians complaining that they're not being paid. And in cases, this is in the hundreds or 200s or 300s of pounds range, which is quite a lot of money in 1642. And these petitions are very frequent, and while I have not been able to locate most of his responses to the petitions, the fact that the petitions are spread over 4 years and that they're continuous indicate that there is an open dialogue between Fielding and his essentially population that he's responsible for. And this is sort of, you can connect this to how civil affairs interacts with the civilian population and trying to figure out, hey, what are the needs of the population so that, you know, in an insurgent war, they don't have to turn to insurgents for those needs, and they can instead turn to a coalition government. So this principle is kind of seen in the open dialogue that's present. Those are the two primary case studies. I also looked at a lot of account records. The account records indicate a lot of garrison commanders spent much of their money on paying civilians back for plunder and vandalism that's committed by soldiers, which is a unique thing where civilians essentially say, hey, I have been robbed by your soldiers, and the commanders, in order to temper their relations, will pay them back for that money out of themselves. And then they will also, where I could see it, extract, you know, some sort of disciplinary measure on the soldiers. These case studies essentially demonstrate that there is an active thought process about civilians in the English Civil War, and that the length of these garrisons over years and years and years of time demonstrate that there's a relationship between a profoundly military government, the war effort, and the civilian population. And there's a lot of principles that can then be seen in how we have formalized the practice of civil military operations today. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Our next student to present will be Jaden LaVecchia. Jaden is a junior from Post Falls, Idaho. He is pursuing a bachelor's degree in Studies in War and Peace with minors in Chinese, Information Warfare, and Intelligence and Crime Analysis. On campus, Jaden is actively involved with several activities, including the Corps of Cadets, the Cyber Leader Development Program, NUARI, FCA, and the Democratic Resilience Center at Helmut Schmidt University. He is currently contracted with the Army, pursuing later work in information warfare and narrative security. His research analyzes patterns in historical information operations and establishes a new cognitive vulnerability framework and heuristic narrative security program for cognitive security. Come on up.
That was a lot of mumbo jumbo in there. I apologize for the techie talk. That was a lot to say. Information warfare is coming for all of us. I'm Jaden LaVecchia. I'm a junior here. If the bio didn't get that across, first off, I'd like to start with a couple of thank yous. First, to all of you, thank you for being here this afternoon. I know it's been a long day, and it's almost over. A couple specific thank yous. One, to Dr. Travis Morris up there for giving me this opportunity. Another to Master Sergeant Sean Lane for being one of my primary sounding boards on this research. And another to the general faculty here for being so open and accepting to something like this. My research centers on a new strategy I'm developing called the Narrative Access and Maneuver Denial Strategy, or NAMD. The strategy focuses on an ethical take on the initiative to counter deceptive influence or information operations targeting democratic societies. To do this, I focused on arguably our three most adversarial countries, Russia, China, and Iran. I picked two major campaigns from each country, namely Ghostwriter, Secondary Infection, Spamouflage, or Dragon Bridge, Glass Bridge, Cotton Sandstorm, and a smaller one from Iran called Likes for Loristan. Now, they're all various types of information operations, typically enabled by some form of cyber means. What they have in common, though, is what's in their crosshairs. And that's you. It's us. A lot of this research that I went through, primarily by sources like Mandiant, formerly FireEye, Recorded Future, Graphica, European Disinformation Lab, they focus on disinformation as a weapon. They don't necessarily focus on the target populace or the people themselves. That's how I wanted to look at this. As a larger map here, you can see those three adversarial countries in red. You can see the United States here in blue, and a lot of the allied powers who were targeted in these campaigns in the sort of dashed green. Key actors to look at here on that allied side are the Eastern European states, as well as Taiwan and the Philippines. Walking through each of these campaigns, I spent more time than I'd like to admit in front of a whiteboard with a marker, just old school chalk talking it out to myself, finding out where things overlapped, what commonalities existed in the tactics, techniques, and procedures, and then looking at the target audience themselves, saying, how were they targeted? Not the country, not the government structure, but the people behind the computer who chose to hit repost, who chose to hit like. How that was weaponized as a means to propagate information. And I also sat down and I said, how can we fight this other than going on the offense? Because America doesn't do offensive influence operations. We have Voices of America, we have Radio Liberty, Radio Free Europe, and those are our means for getting the Western view out there. The question is, how can we defend ourselves against an enemy who doesn't play by the same rules? And that's where I came up with an AMD strategy. This orients off of two key pillars. The first is the cognitive vulnerability framework that is looking at a target audience specifically, each and every single one of us in this auditorium, and going, how are we targeted? What specific parts of our brain make us weakest to information warfare? What tactics do they use to get inside and to make us think one way when we know another? The second pillar is the cognitive red cell. The idea there is to have the good guys on the other side, drawing from cybersecurity best practices to act as one of those adversarial influences, to take on those techniques, and procedures, think like the enemy, act like the enemy, and ultimately help us as the defenders look at where we are weakest and to have a defense in depth. Looking at the cognitive vulnerability framework specifically, I broke it into two subcategories because these were the two that stuck out to me. It's psychological and sociocultural. These were the two largest ones, and they break down in that way. Psychological, for the cyber people in the room, you can think of that as the zero-day vulnerabilities, the ones that are there from the start that are the easiest to find, easiest to exploit, and the hardest for us to look reflectively at. The first one is a fear or a threat trigger. The key case study in my research was on the voter intimidation campaign that took place from Iran targeting the United States in 2020. What happened was the Iranians hijacked an Estonian email server and started sending intimidating emails posing as the American-based far-right extremist group Proud Boys to intimidate Democratic voters across 4 states into voting for President Trump. The idea was to use publicly available personal identifiable information to go, I know where you live, I know that you're a registered Democrat, I know your phone number, your aliases. If you do not vote for Trump, you will not like the consequences. It was relatively convincing at the first half. You look at the email, you go, oh gosh, maybe I'm in trouble. But when you do the digging, you find out, oh, it's an Estonian bookstore. Why would I get it from them? And ultimately, I believe it was Graphica, or Recorded Future, who was able to link it to Iran. And it plays off of all of these different triggers. First, that fear or threat trigger. I'm in trouble. What do I do? Confirmation bias. If you and your friends got the same email, that legitimizes the threat. Heuristic and mental shortcuts. Again, if you have those friends and they see the same thing and they're thinking the same thing, it just reinforces all the ideas before. and the availability bias. If everyone has it, everyone thinks it. And that sociocultural side, you bring these all together. Tribalism is your key one. The idea there is we all kind of band together into our subgroups, our cultural groups. Maybe it's political, maybe it's national unity, maybe it's something else. Maybe we all like to play the same video game. We all get together under those cultural ties, though, and that influences the way that we think and the ways that we are vulnerable. That shared cultural identity, the social proof ideas there, it all reinforces itself together to make us vulnerable in groups rather than individually. It's even worse on social media. I know the people from my generation here, maybe we scroll Instagram too much or YouTube Shorts too much. Every once in a while you come across a Subway Surfers video with text over the top. It's a pretty interesting way to get information across. It relies on subliminal learning. Your eyes are focused on the video itself, but you're still listening to the audio. And somewhere, it's getting embedded into your mind. If you hear it enough, you're going to start to think it's true. If your friends see it enough, they're going to start to think it's true. Boom, you have groupthink. Relying on all of these ideas together, you end up with a vulnerable populace. The question is, how do we stop it? And this is where I came up with the cognitive red cell. This came from a discussion with one of my cyber professors about how we could ethically do information operations for a defense in depth. The answer is we can't. Again, our enemy doesn't play by the same rules we do, so we are at an inherent disadvantage. So how do we get it back? Well, we go on the offense. We target ourselves as the enemy, and we find these barriers. It's a 5-step cycle. It starts off with target audience analysis. We look at ourselves, or if I was a private company doing this, I would look at whoever I was hired to look at. Maybe I would look at economics. I would look at the politics behind it, who they're tied to. I would look at all of the different areas that could be targeted and build out a profile on the target audience, looking at how they're tied together. Maybe they all have the same Facebook pages that they follow. From there, I can look at commonalities. I can build out those psychological and those cultural vulnerabilities by just stepping through publicly available information. And it's scary enough, the stuff that people put on social media now. From that analysis, we can start to weaponize these vulnerabilities. We start to develop a narrative. I have what I want, and I have my end state. I can develop the narrative off of that end state and do it iteratively to make it better and better and better and better and better. From there, once that narrative is developed and I know what vulnerabilities I'm going to target, I disseminate. That's the first step of this kind of 2-step phase of dissemination and cascading. Once I disseminate it, I keep my finger on the pulse of the target audience. I see how they react, how they repost, how they like, how they share. How was their emotional state at the time? Do I have access to somebody who knows them? How did they react? And I keep changing it, adapting it, and making it more and more and more effective over time. And once I have a final product, I cascade it. Not only do I push it out to that one person, I find a way to get it into the algorithm more and more and more so that not only that person sees it and their close friend group sees it, but seemingly everybody around them sees it and starts to think similarly. And from there, I start to do more repetitions of this. It's the same thing, that iteration, but instead of looking at one singular person, you're looking at the whole group that's being targeted. Through this repetition, through this pattern-based building block, we build reports, looking at what was the most effective, what was the least effective, what did I have to tweak to get this to be weaponized to a point where it could be a mass information casualty, if you want to call it that. Based off of this report, we can provide a course of action for whoever the client is. Maybe it's a military, maybe it's a company, maybe it's a city who wants to know how vulnerable their election infrastructure is. The idea is, can we maintain freedom of speech while also countering these adversarial narrative? NAMD proposes an alternative solution to censorship, because censorship in and of itself is a weapon. Now, thank you, Mrs. Bosley, for letting me do this. Once the Q&A period comes around, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that exist. Thank you all for being here again.
Our last student to present is Samriti Menandar. Simriti is a junior from Kathmandu, Nepal, studying criminology and psychology with a minor in forensic psychology and a concentration in criminal forensics. Alongside her studies, she serves as a writing coach at the Center for Writing, where she takes pride in helping others become confident with their voice as well as their writing and academics. Simriti is also actively involved in various activities, including serving as an Office of Academic Research Fellow, a member of the student government, an orientation leader, a contributor to the Chameleon, and the president of the Arts Club. Her curiosity to explore drives her involvement in different research apprenticeships, including serial and mass murder and psychological profiles of stress and coping in young military adults. With the help of the Schultz Fellowship, Simriti's research aims to uncover the stress, resilience, and psychological effects of covert operations and coping mechanisms used by shadow soldiers through in-depth interviews, case studies, and literature reviews.
Hello, respected audience. I am Samriti, and today I am here to give a presentation on the psychology of shadow soldiers, their resilience, stress, and all the psychological warfares and operations that happen in the covert warfares. So first of all, I want to start by giving a scenario. Think of a time where you helped people, anyone, it could be anyone, your friends, your wife, your colleagues. When you help them, your mind just automatically goes on to, it expects something, maybe a thank you, maybe a smile, something nice. But what happens when you don't get anything in return? What happens when you keep having to help them and you don't get anything in return? It's human nature to not want to do those things. But this is the life of a shadow soldier, where they constantly have to battle in their minds, to battle in the shadows by not getting recognized by people, but still having to do these operations. This is their story, and this presentation is hoping to bring light towards their lives. So let's start by starting this quote. Not all wars are fought in battlefields. Some are fought in silence, not exactly in battlefields always. Sometimes they're fought in minds of the shadow soldiers. To start with this presentation, I would like to give a short introduction about what covert warfare is. So what exactly is a covert warfare? It is any type of warfare where the actions are visible, but the one doing it is not visible. We plan to hide the identity of the shadow soldiers, which is why they're called shadow soldiers, because they're doing all the work behind the shadows. And here, it just does not mean strength. Just does not mean muscle or any physical strength. It also means strength of the mind, power of the mind, being able to do all those operations and battling with these minds is really important for this topic, which is why I want to shed some light on this. So the mind of a shadow soldier, not anyone can become a shadow soldier. There are many traits involved. There are many personality characteristics that are involved to become a shadow soldier. First are the psychological traits. You have to be very able to become spatially aware, endurance, adaptability, becoming more aware of the surrounding and know what to do, when to do. It is very important because all these shadow soldiers are keeping everything on the line. Anything can happen anytime. You won't know what's happening. Your life is on the line. The nation is on the line. The privacy, the secrecy, the security of your family is on the line. So you have to be very careful of what your next move is. And to be able to do that, you have to go through a long weeks, months of training, years of training to just be able to have the right mindset to do that, to the point where something happens and you won't even take a millisecond to react. That's how fast a shadow soldier should be able to do any task. Just like I mentioned, here training means transformation. You kind of slowly just expose these shadow soldiers towards their main goal, so that to the point where they actually they are completing their mission, they can just react. Also, they need to be very aware of their emotional responses, because during these missions, they have to be very aware of what situation they're getting into, because it also involves maintaining multiple identities, kind of deceiving everyone around you, even your family, which I will talk about in a while. Living under constant pressure, constant fear, not knowing what happens next, high level of flexibility, doing, just like I mentioned earlier, just knowing what to do, when to do. And this is not something just anyone can do. It can be very exhausting to many people, which is why I think acknowledging these kind of soldiers are very important. So this is actually really real. When they are exposed to long-term operations, some soldiers exhaust themselves, and this is a real phenomenon. It's called the operational stress injury. This is any type of mental or emotional injury that comes after service. We might have heard many people, or there might be many family members that you might have seen or noticed. Many people, especially war veterans, when they come back from war, they change, not just physically, mentally and emotionally. And we might not know what's happening to them, because, especially for shadow soldiers, they aren't really allowed to share anything. So this creates conflict in their minds. It also creates a relationship conflicts and everything, which makes them more dive deep into their conflicts. Which is why I have this quote that says, "Some battles never end, sometimes it follows home." This is actually a quote from an interviewee that I interviewed, and I will be presenting many quotes from him throughout the presentation. These quotes were very powerful to me, and I hope it conveys the same message as it did to me to you guys. I just want to spread more awareness about this, because all those years of training and operating in silence, it can leave a scar, and it is okay that it is okay. This is also really important because the effects of covert operations that the soldiers have, it is same as the Cold War experiment, MKUltra, that was done by the CIA agents, that is actually illegal, where they did many illegal human experiments like electric shock and all that. The stress and aftermath, the injury they had is same as the covert operations, which is very painful to hear, because imagine having the same effects as when you're being electric shocked. It is just really hard for the soldiers, and I just want to bring this to light. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of human cost of secrecy. This is the cost of secrecy that I want to shed light on. Many people that come back from war, they get detached from the real world. They do not know how to adjust to the real world after being surrounded by war and being surrounded by all the gruesome things that they have to see and endure. One of the things that one of my interviewees actually said, that was he had to battle with a lot of moral conflict, where they had to unknowingly unalive an innocent person, and they did not know that. This is a toll. It leaves a toll to people, which not many people know about. How often do we think about the mistakes that we made 10 years ago in that class? Oh, I forgot to do this. We still remember that. So think about how these soldiers might think about all the decisions that they made, about all the people that they had to unalive, even if they were innocent, just because of their mission. This leaves a very big toll on people, and the people might not even be allowed to express because of the secrecy and the contract that they have signed. So this is what exactly happens. They might develop PTSD, anxiety, guilt from the moral conflicts and the moral decisions that they have to make, detachment, isolating themselves from the family, from the world, from themselves too. Some people even developed multiple identities that because they just want to get away from whatever they have done in the past, which is what brings us to the coping mechanisms. Some of the most common coping mechanisms are compartmentalization, where you just kind of dump the trauma into some part of your brain and you just don't ever go into it. But it's still there. You might not know it, but your mind's consciousness will someday bring it back. You might have nightmares, you might have anxiety related to it. Someday, some way, it will come out, which is why we have to tackle it as soon as the symptoms starts appearing. Some people also like to cope by humor and brotherhood, which is what I've seen here very commonly, especially in Norwich too. The use of dark humor, jokes, and it's like, oh, I'll be okay. It's just like one day, I'm dying every day inside, and they're laughing by saying this, but what exactly is happening in their minds? What happens when you're just alone in your room and there's no light in the room? What exactly are you thinking? Are you still joking, or are you still thinking about your past, that one mistake, that one decision that you made that changed everyone's lives? Which is why this topic, I think, is really important and should be more aware about. So this is actually a picture of me driving, and you guys might be wondering, why is this picture here? Because it's just a random picture of me, right? But this is actually here because this is AI generated. I don't even have a car like that, and I don't even have a purple dress like that, which is very scary, especially for a woman, where anything can happen, anything can be generated like this, and it still looks like me, which is very scary. This brings our mind towards future modern front lines, the covert operations related to digital warfare. This is actually a serious issue that is happening, where AI can generate anything. You can create deepfakes, and we won't know exactly what is true and what is not true. This is very harmful because this can create conflicts between many nations, and it can basically spread false information, which is not good for anyone. And I just wanted to show that with my picture because it is really dangerous. It can just make the truth blurry about what exactly is truth, who to trust. Can you even trust something at this point? That's what it will make you think. So from all these operations, the shadow soldiers have a lot of conflict, ethical and moral. If deceiving people like this can take their lives, should that even be legal? Or how do they live from that wound that they have created to their families, to the nation, to the innocent lives, to the family of someone innocent that died? How do they live with it? They have to constantly battle with this every time. And some people might be able to cope with it, but some people won't, which is normal, which is why this importance of the case studies also give some example about how people have made it after these operations. First example is Virginia Hall. She was actually a spy for the French, and she was going against the Nazi Germany. She was actually considered the most dangerous spy because she was working under the shadows, providing resources to the French, secretly creating allies of the French to go against Nazi Germany. And she made it out alive, but not many people do that. So she later joined the CIA agent, and she was actually a really impressive woman, and I admire her a lot. Another example is Eli Cohen. He unfortunately did not make it out alive, and it had a huge toll on his family, his wife, because his wife was not even aware of what he was doing. He was actually working for the Israeli government, and he was working as a Syrian spy, kind of acting as a wealthy businessman by getting close to all the high power people in the politics, to the point where he was able to become an advice agent for many big political agents. So later he was caught and executed, but his wife and his children had to bear all the consequences of it too. So it is not exactly just your own burden to carry, it can also carry home, like I said. It can also carry home towards your family and everyone around you. So these are other quotes from the interviewee I mentioned earlier. He was actually a mercenary for the Marines, and his job was to basically unalive people, which is where the toll comes in, because he was conflicted between many choices when he had to carry out his operations. According to him, his words, "You learn to wear masks not just to hide from the enemy, but sometimes to hide from yourself. Just like how I mentioned earlier, you create other identities. You do not want to face what you did, so you just act like someone else. You just kind of throw everything on the side because you don't want to face with it, but it's not exactly a healthy way to cope." The other quote is, "Pain either crushes you or forges you into something harder," which is something that these soldiers have to keep in mind every time, every second of the mission. Okay, this is happening, but what am I going to do about it? I'm just going to be stronger. This is going to make me stronger. This is their mindset most of the time. And this is why I admire them a lot, because this is a huge thing to do. Even the smallest things while making decisions, we think 100 times. Even about this presentation, I was thinking about it 100 times. But imagine how much do you have to think when people's lives are on the line, which is why this is very important, and this whole topic should be more aware of. And this comes to the conclusion. Here are the key findings. I just want to aware everyone that yes, the shadow soldiers exist, and it does have a psychological toll on themselves, the nation too, and their families too. It's not just anyone who can do it. They have to train a lot. They have to work through a lot. Resilience building, a lot of resilience building. And sometimes this resilience does not always mean being strong, but also being aware of your weaknesses. So you can be more aware about what's happening and your strengths and weaknesses so you can work through them. It also sheds light that all these operations comes with a price, often the price of the soldier's mind. I want to end by saying this might have been a long presentation, and I was actually discussing with my mentor, but this is the most important part of my presentation. I don't really care if you guys do not get anything from this presentation except this one slide. Especially it has become an honor to present this in a military college where there are many people like you, people in the audience that might have been through this or will go through this someday. You might have sons, daughters, fathers, sisters, brothers that might be going through this every day, which is why it is very important to raise awareness about this, to let them know that they are not alone, and it is not their own duty to carry their burden alone. They can talk to anyone. They can seek help. Seeking help does not mean that we are weak. Seeking help means that we are aware of what we have been through and we are strong enough to face it. So we have to be more acceptable of ourselves and the things they have done. Because just like this quote mentioned, that is also from the interviewee, you won't always be the hero of everyone's story, but you might be a hero of someone's story or your own. This becomes very important because no matter who sees you as wrong or whatever, you just have to be strong enough to see yourself as the capable person that was able to carry those operations even when you were so much under pressure. To remind yourself that, okay, this has been done, but what can I do next to become better? And we all are human. We make mistakes. We constantly fight with moral decisions. This might be one of them, but this is not just the end of it. Remember always that you are human first before you are any type of weapon. Human emotions are normal, and just because the shadow operators work in the dark does not mean they don't deserve light. And this is the call to action, that they do deserve light. Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone in this audience. I want everyone to become aware of what they have done and what they are about to do and not be ashamed of it, to seek help when you think necessary. I just want to thank the Peace and War Center, my parents, my friends, my mentor for believing in myself even when I wasn't able to myself. This is something very powerful, and I hope this carries on. I hope this makes you guys a little bit more aware of before presentation, a little more before the presentation. Now that you are aware, I hope you guys take action personally too, and for the people around you. And lastly, I just want to say thank you to all the shadow soldiers for serving. Thank you.
We do have time for 1 or 2 questions. If anyone would like to pose a question to any of the students who presented, please step up to one of the 2 microphones.
Hello, my name is Marcus Paul. I have a question for Mr. LaVecchia. You mentioned that we are under attack from several nations due to misinformation campaigns. What are some things that I can do as a user of social media to prevent myself from foreign influence? Because sometimes, you know, you're scrolling through Reels and you see the same thing over and over and over again, so it like gets in your brain, like you mentioned, theories of groupthink and collective bias. What are some things I can do to keep myself more informed of misinformation attacks?
Yeah, first thing is thinking critically, right? If you see something that's obviously fake or immediately trying to get your emotions, that's one of your first and biggest red flags right off the bat. If you see something that's been reposted countless times but has minimal likes or has a lot of likes that doesn't really track with its engagement or comments or something like that, different incongruities between posts and interaction, that's another big red flag. Or what looks like a big account but also newly generated, something like that. Another one, I've been a victim of this, I think 3 times now, where someone tries to co-opt trust through somebody else's account. I've seen 3 or 4 duplicates of my personal Instagram account pop up now. And if you see stuff like that, those are the kind of simple ones. Reaching out more, looking at something that tries to immediately strike your emotions, whether it be anger, fear, sadness, something like that. Maybe it's a video of a puppy or something. That one's relatively innocent. But if you see almost like atrocity propaganda, that's a big one. Being smart enough to go, hey, that's screwed up, but also the wherewithal to go, is the story that's along with this image or this video the actual story? That's the easiest one.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. My question is for Cadet Jaden LaVecchia as well. It's more specific to the target audience analysis based on the cognitive red cell that you mentioned. I just wanted to know, like, how are the target audience selected? Is it based on the cognitive vulnerabilities that you mentioned? Like, you see these different things happening, and that's how you find the target audience, or is it mostly based on like activities like the confirmation bias or like polarization? And if that is the case, like, would you say that this workflow is sort of reactive rather than proactive because it's acting more like a red team in a pen testing environment? And yeah, just wanted to know more about like the target audience analysis and selection.
Yeah, when I built this out, I was thinking about it in a very military perspective, right? Hey, I just got an order based off of this. I'm going to look at X, Y, and Z, plan, execute, and then reorient. From a very like almost private sector perspective, looking at, hey, I just got an order. This company wants me to look at maybe where they're vulnerable to a other corporation that wants to do X, Y, or Z. Maybe they want to do a merger. Maybe they want to do a hostile takeover. What's the likelihood? What are the ways that they can do it? The target audience analysis is your first tip off of how is the bad guy going to act? And then from that target audience analysis, you go, not only how are they going to act, what specific courses of action are they likely to use? Does that answer your question?
I do have a follow-up question, but I'll ask that once the session is over.
We'll have to end the questions there due to time, but you're welcome to address the students after the session. Thank you very much to everyone who joined this afternoon.